The Galactic Empire had ruled for thousands of years, spreading across the stars like a rising tide. It was built on conquest, tradition, and unmatched power. Every species they discovered was either conquered or quietly joined, knowing resistance was useless. The Empire didn't just win wars, it erased opposition with brutal efficiency. Their technology was far more advanced, their fleets enormous, and their soldiers raised to believe in one truth: the Empire never loses. On the central throne world, where the golden towers touched the clouds and the Emperor's word was law, no one feared the future. There was nothing left to fear. Until they found the humans. It started with a routine exploration signal. One of their deep space probes returned data from the Sol system, a previously unmonitored sector. A primitive species, barely spacefaring, had just begun to explore nearby planets. They called themselves humans and came from a small blue planet named Earth. The Empire's response was the same as always. They sent a diplomatic vessel with a small escort. The orders were simple: offer peaceful absorption into the Empire, or prepare for military enforcement. No one expected trouble. The humans were so new to the galactic stage that they had only colonized a few planets. Their fleet was small, their ships outdated. They still used projectile weapons. Some in the Empire laughed when the name humans was mentioned. Others didn't even bother to remember it. The diplomatic ship never returned. What came back instead was a wrecked escape pod carrying the shredded uniform of a high speaker, a symbol of peaceful negotiation. The transmission attached was short. A single human voice said, "We don't kneel." At first, the Emperor didn't believe it. No species had ever dared refuse. It had to be a mistake, a rogue faction perhaps. But soon, sensors picked up movement from the Sol system. Human ships, in formation, heading to meet the Empire's scouting fleet. The High Command sent a task force to teach them a lesson. They believed it would be over in minutes, but when the Empire's fleet arrived at Mars, they walked straight into a trap. Human ships didn't fight to delay or defend. They fought to destroy. The first space battle lasted only 27 minutes and ended with the complete loss of 3 Imperial warships. The rest retreated in shock. The High Command held an emergency meeting. Panic was not part of the Empire's way, but confusion spread fast. How had humans known their fleet's exact route? How had they disabled their targeting systems? More importantly, why had they chosen war? What kind of species would challenge the greatest force in the galaxy after first contact? The more they looked into human history, the more uneasy they became. This was not a peaceful race. These were survivors of global wars, disasters, and centuries of internal conflict. Humans had not been protected by nature or guided by higher powers. They had suffered and survived. Again and again. The Empire decided to strike hard before humans spread further. A full battle group was sent toward Earth with the goal of total surrender. But the humans had already disappeared. Their colonies went dark. Their ships scattered across the stars, hiding behind asteroid fields and gas giants, using stealth technology so strange it confused even the Empire's AI systems. Then the attacks began. Not head-on battles, but surgical strikes, supply lines destroyed, communication hubs hacked, and starbases falling without warning. One Imperial officer reported the human commandos had infiltrated a station dressed as civilians, then disabled the shields before the bombing run. These weren't soldiers fighting for orders. They were individuals fighting for existence, and they didn't care about the rules of war. The Empire soon learned the most dangerous human weapon wasn't a ship or a gun, it was their thinking. Humans adapted faster than any enemy before. Every time the Empire changed tactics, humans changed faster. They studied every battle, every weakness, and turned losses into lessons. One admiral said, "We've fought machines, monsters, and rebellions. But this is the first time we've fought something that learns as it bleeds." It wasn't just military strength, it was belief. Humans didn't fight to conquer. They fought because they refused to be controlled. They saw freedom not as a luxury, but as life itself. That made them impossible to scare. Desperate for understanding, the Empire captured a group of human prisoners. What they discovered shocked even the most hardened generals. Humans had trained for war long before they left their planet. They had survived world wars, nuclear threats, disease, and social collapse. Their strongest leaders had once been soldiers. Their children learned about history through stories of resistance and rebellion. To them, war wasn't a disaster. It was part of being alive. One prisoner said, "You think this is our first war? We were born in it. You're just another chapter." That sentence alone changed everything. The Empire realized it was no longer facing a species. It was facing a force of nature. And yet, the humans kept coming. Small ships attacked dreadnoughts. Outnumbered fleets refused to retreat. Colonies under siege refused to surrender. Each loss only made them stronger. Reports came in of humans using captured Imperial weapons and turning them back against their enemies. Even worse, they didn't have a single leader to negotiate with. Humanity was scattered across planets and systems, but they were united in one thing: resistance. No bribes worked. No fear tactics succeeded. The Emperor, once so sure of his unshakable throne, now sat in silence as his generals debated strategies no one believed in anymore. Back on Earth, humanity didn't celebrate their victories. They didn't see themselves as heroes. They simply knew they couldn't lose, because losing meant extinction. There were no backup plans, no escape routes. This wasn't about pride, it was survival. And that kind of war, the Empire had never fought before. In their arrogance, they had seen humans as small and weak. But what they failed to see was the strength hidden beneath that weakness, a strength built from centuries of struggle and a history soaked in pain. The Empire had mistaken peace for submission. That was their biggest mistake. Now, the stars burned with battles, and the Empire finally knew fear, not of weapons or ships, but of a species that refused to bow, refused to break, and above all, refused to forget. The war had only begun, but one thing was already clear: this would not end the way the Empire expected. Not this time. The stars were no longer silent. After the Empire's first failed attempt to intimidate humanity, a new fire had been lit in the dark corners of the galaxy. The High Command could not allow such humiliation to stand. Their honor, power, and long-standing rule depended on swift punishment. In a grand display of force, they gathered one of their strongest battle groups. Hundreds of warships, each loaded with weapons powerful enough to melt planets, guided by some of the most experienced admirals in the galaxy. They called it a disciplinary strike, not a war. They believed they would overwhelm Earth in days, silence its defiance, and turn the Sol system into another conquered memory. Confidence echoed through their war halls as their generals spoke of glory and victory. But they still hadn't learned the truth about humans, and when they finally arrived near Mars, the mistake of underestimating them would become a nightmare they couldn't escape. As the Empire's battle group entered the system, sensors scanned for resistance. At first, it seemed quiet. Earth's planetary defense grid wasn't fully visible, and human ships were nowhere in sight. The admirals assumed fear had taken hold, that humans had finally realized their place. Then, without warning, one of the leading destroyers lost control. Its navigation systems spun in chaos, as if being pulled by an invisible hand. Seconds later, a flash of light burst through its hull, and it was gone, vaporized by a missile that came from nowhere. Alarms blared across the entire fleet. What followed was pure confusion. The Empire had expected a simple confrontation. Instead, they were met with guerrilla tactics that made their advanced systems almost useless. Human ships began appearing on the edges of their formation, striking hard and vanishing before the Empire could respond. These weren't full frontal attacks. These were traps, planned, precise, and personal. One admiral tried to regroup the fleet, but his flagship was hit by a swarm of autonomous drones. Each drone was small, barely the size of a fighter, but carried explosive charges that ripped through armor like paper. The flagship didn't explode. It fell apart slowly, its pieces drifting in silence as emergency beacons failed. Panic spread across the fleet. The Empire had faced rebellions before, but never like this. Humans didn't aim to win in numbers. They didn't charge into battle with fanfare. They used every shadow, every blind spot, and every weakness they could find. Even worse, they didn't follow the Empire's logic. They didn't protect only their homeworld. They fought from moons, stations, even hollowed-out asteroids, turning the system itself into a battlefield. And all the while, they sent no messages of surrender, only silence. It was as if humanity had vanished into the stars, becoming ghosts with guns. Within an hour, the Empire lost more ships than they had in their last 3 campaigns combined. Elite pilots were outmaneuvered by humans flying ships, held together by engineering tricks that made no sense to Imperial eye. One officer reported that a human frigate had intentionally allowed itself to be hit, just so it could get close enough to board the attacking ship. That same frigate then self-destructed, taking both vessels with it. This kind of warfare was alien to the Empire. Their soldiers were trained for precision and control, not chaos and sacrifice. And yet, every human move seemed to be a step ahead, as if they had known exactly when and where the Empire would strike. The real shock came when the Empire's communications hub was hacked mid-battle. Human code streamed across screens, shutting down fleet coordination and causing collisions between friendly ships. Then, a human voice echoed across all channels, speaking calmly. "You should have listened when we said we don't kneel." That single line, so simple and steady, carried a weight that no imperial order could erase. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning, and it marked the end of the Empire's illusion of control. The surviving ships attempted to retreat, but the exits had been mined. Human fighters chased them like wolves, disabling engines and leaving ships drifting. The ones that weren't destroyed were captured, and their crews vanished, never to be heard from again. The few ships that escaped returned to Imperial space in silence. No words could explain the failure. The Emperor himself ordered an emergency review of every file on human history. As he watched the footage of Earth's past, wars, revolutions, survival through chaos, he began to understand what his generals had refused to see. Humans didn't fear war. They were shaped by it. Their planet had been a constant test of survival. Nature hadn't given them claws, shells, or fangs, but it had given them something far worse for any enemy: adaptability. They learned from pain. They evolved through failure. And in space, they had brought that same spirit with them. The Emperor whispered only one word as the reports ended: dangerous. Across human space, there were no celebrations, no parades or victory speeches. For them, the battle had only begun. They knew the Empire would return with even greater force, but they were ready. Engineers worked day and night in hidden shipyards. Scientists tested new weapons built from stolen Imperial tech. Children learned emergency drills not in case of war, but because war was already here. Humanity had unified not under one leader, but one cause: survival. And that made them powerful in a way the Empire couldn't match. They didn't fight for territory or dominance. They fought because they had to, because losing meant extinction, and because deep inside, every human knew that this was their moment to show the galaxy who they truly were. In the ruins of the Empire's broken fleet, black boxes recorded the final moments. Human ships flying through explosions, laughing pilots broadcasting ancient Earth music as they dodged death, and soldiers shouting orders with voices full of fire. These weren't monsters. They weren't heroes either. They were something else entirely. Something new. Something the galaxy had never seen before. And the first strike was only a taste of what was coming. After the failed first strike, the Galactic Empire was shaken. The once proud commanders, who had spoken boldly of Earth's destruction, now sat in silence, reviewing the broken remains of their fleet. The Emperor had ordered a full lockdown on news of the defeat, but rumors were already spreading like wildfire across the Empire's outer colonies. Whispers of a species that fought like demons and disappeared like shadows, a species that had made fools out of the strongest navy in the galaxy. Still, the High Council refused to accept that a single small planet could be such a threat. Pride made them blind, and fear made them foolish. Instead of understanding the humans, they labeled the defeat a fluke and sent spies, scouts, and hidden probes to gather information about Earth's defenses, unaware that this simple move would awaken something far worse than they had ever imagined. Not from the humans, but from somewhere else, something ancient and silent, watching from the dark. Deep in a forgotten corner of space, beyond mapped systems and monitored zones, the Empire's secret research ships stumbled upon an anomaly, a massive structure buried inside a dead moon, so well hidden that it didn't match any known design or era. Believing it to be an abandoned weapon left behind by a long-dead civilization, the Empire's scientists rushed to explore it. They sent drones inside, expecting ruins, but instead they found a perfectly preserved control center, still active and running systems that didn't use any known form of energy. They couldn't read the language on the walls, but they didn't care. Greedy for power, they began extracting tech, cutting into walls, and downloading strange blueprints. That's when the signal was sent, a silent pulse, far beyond the speed of light, traveling into the black. The researchers didn't notice it, but something else did. Something that had been sleeping. Something that had not moved in over 10,000 years. And now, because of the Empire's curiosity, it woke up. The first sign of trouble came quietly. Entire outposts along the edges of Empire territory stopped responding. At first, the Empire thought it was sabotage from the humans. But when scout ships arrived at those locations, they found no bodies, no wreckage, just silence and dust, like everything had vanished without a fight. Then the machines appeared. They were unlike anything the Empire had seen. Black, smooth, and silent, with no life signs and no known engines. They didn't attack at first. They just drifted near stations and watched. And when the Empire fired warning shots, the machines responded in an instant, cutting through ships with weapons that bent space and time. They didn't communicate. They didn't demand anything. They just destroyed, swiftly and without emotion. Within weeks, the Empire realized they had triggered an ancient guardian race, artificial beings left behind to protect something long forgotten. And now, those machines had judged the Empire unworthy. The Empire's fleets, still recovering from their loss to humanity, rushed to defend their borders, only to find that their weapons were useless. Energy shields melted, plasma blasts passed harmlessly through enemy hulls, and their greatest warships were torn apart by invisible forces. Some commanders tried to flee, only to be caught in traps they couldn't detect. The machines were intelligent, adaptive, and relentless. Entire sectors went dark. Panic spread through the Imperial population, but still the High Council refused to admit the truth. Instead, they blamed the humans, claiming this was part of Earth's retaliation. That lie didn't last long. Soon, the machines arrived near Earth's region of space, but something strange happened. They didn't attack. They simply scanned, watched, and vanished again. Earth's scientists noticed it too, and quickly realized the machines were not targeting them. Instead, they were moving in a pattern, one that led straight into the heart of the Empire. For the first time, humans and the Empire had a shared threat, but neither side trusted the other enough to talk. Back on Earth, military leaders debated what to do. They had no love for the Empire, but they also knew that if these machines could wipe out such a vast empire so easily, then humanity was next. But something about the way the machines avoided Earth gave them hope. Maybe the machines saw something in humans that the Empire didn't. Maybe they weren't enemies, yet. Still, humanity didn't wait. They fortified every outpost, activated ancient bunkers, and deployed stealth satellites across every possible entry point. At the same time, Earth's top minds began analyzing the captured signals from the machines, trying to understand their purpose. What they discovered shocked them. The machines were responding to a pattern, an ancient sequence triggered by the Empire's tampering. They were not attacking at random. They were following a forgotten rule. Eliminate any civilization that awakened the Forbidden Code, a code the Empire had broken without knowing it. And now the machines would not stop until the source of the breach, the Empire itself, was erased from the galaxy. Time ago, before known history, a great civilization had ruled the stars. They were not machines, but something more, organic and synthetic together. When they vanished, they left behind guardians to protect the galaxy from dangerous tech and civilizations. But they also left behind one last piece of their legacy, a seed of themselves, hidden in the genes of a life form on a young planet that had not even formed yet. That seed was humanity, meant to grow, adapt, and survive, and one day reclaim what was lost. But nobody told the Empire that. And now, by trying to destroy the humans, they had triggered the final protocol. The machines had not attacked Earth because they were waiting for something. And now, it was coming. Deep in the outer rim, strange energy waves began to rise. Not from machines, but from something else, something large and slow-moving. Ancient satellites, long dead, suddenly lit up again and transmitted coordinates that led to a hidden planet behind a collapsing star. Earth's leaders sent a small team, protected by cloaking tech, to investigate. What they found shocked them. A massive station, older than anything they had seen, shaped like a ring, orbiting a dark world. Inside, they found rooms filled with stasis chambers, each holding strange figures. Tall, glowing beings who looked almost human, but with features that hinted at something beyond. As the team moved closer, one of the beings opened its eyes and whispered a name in a language no one understood. But somehow, every human heard it in their mind. The being told them that the machines were only doing their duty to protect the future. But the real danger wasn't the Empire. It was something else, something that had been locked away long ago and was now starting to return. The reason humans were created wasn't just to survive, but to fight. They were designed to be unpredictable, emotional, and adaptable, traits that machines could never copy and enemies could never fully understand. The Empire had feared those traits, but the machines saw them as necessary. Humanity was the last defense against the return of the ancient enemy, and that time was now coming. The being warned them that if humanity didn't awaken soon, everything would fall. Then it closed its eyes again, and the station powered down. Earth's leaders now had a choice: keep hiding, or unlock the secret buried in their blood and become what they were always meant to be. Back on Earth, a global emergency summit was called. Secrets were revealed, and the population was told the truth. At first, there was fear, confusion, and disbelief. But then something changed. People started to come together, not in panic, but in unity. Old divisions faded. Scientists, soldiers, teachers, and even children volunteered to help. Tests were created to identify those with the ancient signal. Special teams were formed, trained in both human and alien tech. These people were called the Awakened, and they began preparing for what was coming. For the first time in known history, Earth was not just defending, it was leading. And far away, the machines, watching in silence, began to gather. Not in attack formation, but in escort. They had seen the signal too. The humans were finally ready. And the true enemy had just entered the galaxy once more. The Empire had always believed in control. Every planet catalogued, every species measured, every threat calculated, and every war won before it even began. For thousands of years, this strategy worked without fail. They ruled with technology, with fear, and with their unmatched fleets that could crush entire civilizations in a single sweep. When they first discovered humans, they saw only another primitive race, small, emotional, unpredictable. They didn't understand human culture, their chaotic way of thinking, or their strange ability to adapt. The Empire ignored warnings from historians, dismissed strange data from early scouts, and refused to study the few ancient symbols found on Earth that didn't match any known galactic language. Instead, they rushed into conflict with the confidence of conquerors. They saw an easy victory, a small war to keep the outer systems in line. But what they didn't realize was that their greatest mistake wasn't underestimating human weapons. It was misunderstanding what humans truly were. And by the time they figured it out, it began when the Empire launched its final strike, a massive fleet of over 100 warships descending on Earth's orbit like a metal storm. They believed the humans would surrender or scatter like every other species had done before. But instead of panic, they found resistance. Not just military resistance, but something deeper: unity, determination, and a silence in the humans' eyes that made the commanders nervous. Earth's defenses were fewer, older, and less advanced, but they fought with a strange energy the Empire had never encountered. Ships that should have fallen stayed afloat. Weapons jammed but were repaired mid-battle by humans who refused to quit. Wounded soldiers stood up again and kept fighting with broken arms and burned faces. It wasn't technology keeping them in the fight. It was something inside them, something the Empire couldn't see or understand. That was the first warning. The second came when the machines returned. Silent, massive, and powerful beyond imagination. The ancient guardians had been watching from the edges of the galaxy. The Empire had triggered them by unlocking forbidden signals on a long-dead moon, believing they could control what came next. But the machines didn't come to destroy Earth. They came to protect it. They formed a barrier between Earth and the Empire's fleet, refusing to fire, but not moving either. The commanders tried to threaten, then reason, then attack, but the machines simply absorbed the damage and disabled the ships without killing. One by one, the Empire's proud vessels became useless metal statues in orbit. That was the second warning. The machines were not enemies of humanity. They were responding to something in the humans, something ancient that even the humans didn't fully understand. A secret inside their DNA, a message written billions of years ago, had awakened. And now the machines were following a protocol that no one could override. Still, the Empire refused to stop. Instead of retreating, they sent ground troops. They believed if they took Earth's cities, they could force surrender. But on the surface, they faced not just human soldiers, but civilians fighting with tools, stones, and fire. Old men and women stood beside children, not out of madness, but because something in their blood told them this was more than war. This was destiny. The Empire tried to use their advanced armor, but humans found ways to disable it with simple tools. Their drones were hacked by human teenagers. Their strategy collapsed because they were facing an enemy that didn't follow rules. Humanity didn't just want to win. They refused to lose. And that scared the Empire more than any weapon. In one final desperate move, the Empire activated a doomsday weapon hidden deep in a black site beyond the Andromeda Veil, a gravity implosion bomb that could erase a star system in seconds. They believed this would show the machines and humans their true power, but the moment they prepared to fire it, something unexpected happened. The machines didn't attack the Empire. They shut them down from within. Ships powered down mid-space, weapons melted without heat, and worst of all, their memories were erased. High commanders forgot their own names. Scientists wept as their minds were wiped clean. Only one message remained, repeated in every language the Empire had ever spoken. This was your final warning. It wasn't humanity that destroyed the Empire's fleet. It wasn't even the machines. It was their own mistake. They had touched something ancient, something bigger than power, and they had done it with arrogance. It began when the Empire launched its final strike, a massive fleet of over 100 warships descending on Earth's orbit like a metal storm. They believed the humans would surrender or scatter like every other species had done before. But instead of panic, they found resistance. Not just military resistance, but something deeper: unity, determination, and a silence in the humans' eyes that made the commanders nervous. Earth's defenses were fewer, older, and less advanced, but they fought with a strange energy the Empire had never encountered. Ships that should have fallen stayed afloat. Weapons jammed but were repaired mid-battle by humans who refused to quit. Wounded soldiers stood up again and kept fighting with broken arms and burned faces. It wasn't technology keeping them in the fight. It was something inside them, something the Empire couldn't see or understand. That was the first warning. The second came when the machines returned, silent, massive, and powerful beyond imagination. The ancient guardians had been watching from the edges of the galaxy. The Empire had triggered them by unlocking forbidden signals on a long-dead moon, believing they could control what came next. But the machines didn't come to destroy Earth. They came to protect it. They formed a barrier between Earth and the Empire's fleet, refusing to fire, but not moving either. The commanders tried to threaten, then reason, then attack, but the machines simply absorbed the damage and disabled the ships without killing. One by one, the Empire's proud vessels became useless metal statues in orbit. That was the second warning. The machines were not enemies of humanity. They were responding to something in the humans, something ancient that even the humans didn't fully understand. A secret inside their DNA, a message written billions of years ago, had awakened. And now the machines were following a protocol that no one could override. Still, the Empire refused to stop. Instead of retreating, they sent ground troops. They believed if they took Earth's cities, they could force surrender. But on the surface, they faced not just human soldiers, but civilians fighting with tools, stones, and fire. Old men and women stood beside children, not out of madness, but because something in their blood told them this was more than war. This was destiny. The Empire tried to use their advanced armor, but humans found ways to disable it with simple tools. Their drones were hacked by human teenagers. Their strategy collapsed because they were facing an enemy that didn't follow rules. Humanity didn't just want to win. They refused to lose. And that scared the Empire more than any weapon. In one final desperate move, the Empire activated a doomsday weapon hidden deep in a black site beyond the Andromeda Veil, a gravity implosion bomb that could erase a star system in seconds. They believed this would show the machines and humans their true power. But the moment they prepared to fire it, something unexpected happened. The machines didn't attack the Empire, they shut them down from within. Ships powered down mid-space, weapons melted without heat, and worst of all, their memories were erased. High commanders forgot their own names. Scientists wept as their minds were wiped clean. Only one message remained, repeated in every language the Empire had ever spoken. This was your final warning. It wasn't humanity that destroyed the Empire's fleet. It wasn't even the machines. It was their own mistake. They had touched something ancient, something bigger than power, and they had done it with arrogance. The Empire's collapse wasn't loud. It happened quietly, piece by piece. Colonies lost contact. Trade routes vanished. Citizens rebelled, not because they supported humans, but because they realized their leaders had lied. The Empire had promised control, safety, and eternal rule. But now they saw the truth. There were forces older than the Empire, and humans were part of them. Earth didn't rise as a new conqueror. They offered no demands, no revenge. They simply rebuilt. And slowly, other planets began to send messages, not of surrender, but of interest. Who were these humans who had survived the Empire's wrath? What was the secret that made machines stand beside them? And could they learn it too? Earth became a symbol, not of war, but of something far more powerful: hope. And as for the humans, they finally started to understand themselves. With the help of the machines, they unlocked more of the ancient code buried in their blood. They saw visions of a time before stars, of creators who planted life across galaxies, and of a coming storm far worse than the Empire. They weren't chosen to destroy. They were chosen to remember, to guide, and to resist the return of what had once ended the stars. Now they stood ready, not just for defense, but for leadership, not with power, but with the one thing the Empire never understood: heart. The biggest mistake the Empire ever made wasn't underestimating humans. It was believing that strength came only from weapons and fear. They never saw that true power was not in domination, but in survival, in unity, and in the unbreakable spirit of a species that refused to kneel. And now, across the stars, that lesson echoed louder than any war cry. The Empire was gone. The future belonged to the ones they had tried to erase.